I'm really, really excited to welcome Anna Crawley to the Core Connections podcast. So I want to go ahead and start, Anna, and have you just share a little bit about you and what, got you into all of the pelvic floor fascial work, the amazing work that you are doing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. Gosh, that's like asking for my whole life story, that is. So how did I get into fascial work? So even when I was first training as a physio, I'm a women's health physical therapist in the UK. And I'm also a myofascial release practitioner. And I'm a mum of two girls. And then recently I've had some research papers written about pelvic organ prolapse and putting forward the idea that it's rooted in too much tension and stiffness within the pelvic floor rather than weakness. So that's what I do really. And where did that all come from? So I'll skip big chunks of it because otherwise it's my whole life story. But okay. Basically, I learned fascia release like quite a few years ago. Sort of, was it before I had my kids? I think it was, yeah. And I was integrating that into my day-to-day work as a MSK physiotherapist. And then I had my own kids and I had my own experience of birth injury. And I think like most women's health physiotherapists, we were MSK physios who then have babies who go, oh, who's treating this? Okay, not enough people. Okay, that would be me then, right? Okay. And so I started doing that. And then at some point along the line, I was doing up a house. And through doing up a house, I had my own experience of prolapse. And at the beginning of my journey through that, I had the whole spectrum of emotions that I think a lot of women have of, just real distress and upset and how is this ever going to get any better? And I started with doing what I thought I should do. So essentially Kegels. And, it just didn't work. It just didn't work for me at all. And because I had this background in myofascial release, I was like, okay, well, how about I just take a completely different approach and just follow, basically what happens if I just myofascially release my own pelvic floor? I was like, okay, then there you go. My prolapse went away. I was like, oh, wow. Right.
That's amazing.
Okay. Yeah, it was really good. And then I had this like penny drop moment. I realized that all this stuff that I'd learned back in fascia training school was really, really, really important for understanding pelvic organ prolapse. Essentially the sort of the key thing that I took from that myofascial training and added into this pelvic health world is that our structural system, our way that we hold ourselves together is something called biotensegrity. And that means that we are this three-dimensional web of soft tissue, which is self-suspending and everything else is kind of embedded within that. And that is really quite different to sort of old school mechanics, which says that the head rests on top of the spine, which rests on top of the pelvis. So really, I had this kind of light bulb moment that I realized that all that structural fascial science was really important for understanding what pelvic organ prolapse is and how to treat it. And then since then, that's just completely driven my day-to-day practice, my research and everything really.
I love it.
Yeah, that's like a bit of my life story.
I love your quick, short story, but it's great because I resonate so much with it, not with the pelvic organ prolapse, but like, it's so many times our life experiences that get us to discover really new and amazing things that are just changing women's health for the better. But we just have to, this is why I have you on today, because we have to talk about this more and more and more. So women start to understand like, gosh, you don't have to deal with pelvic organ prolapse. Like there is things that we can do. So because
Absolutely, yeah.
you hit on so many good things. I'm like, where do I want to start? I have so much I want to talk about, but let's start with the Kegel conversation and being too tight, because I remember, and I told you this before we started recording, I was like, when I heard you speak, I was like, thank you so much, because we're finally talking about how, being too restricted is actually contributing to more problems. And not saying that weakness isn't part of it too, but right. Like, cause that's what I've discovered in so many women we've worked with. And I'm not a manual therapist. I'm just teaching through movement. So it was really awesome to hear you say that. So let's start there. Let's talk about like, okay, well, why are Kegels so ineffective for so many people? And why is being too tight a problem?
Okay. And to explain that, I need to take a little step back into these basic principles. And it's because these basic principles and the science of these basic principles, which is why it doesn't matter whether it's manual therapy or movement therapy or breath work or trauma work or whatever it is that releases your system. Okay. So essentially, I've got to define this biotensegrity thing, because to understand what's really happening with pelvic organ prolapse, that's the key. So the old way that we used to understand the body was that one thing was on top of the other, which is on top of the other. So essentially, the pelvic floor is at the bottom of the body, and the job of the pelvic floor is to hold everything up from below. Okay, so that's old mechanics. That's actually disproven 40-year out of date mechanics, right?
Yes.
But sadly, it is still the basic mechanics of human structure, which is used to explain a lot of gynecological conditions. So the really common explanation that women get given is that your pelvic floor is weak, and so things have fallen into your vagina, and so you need to squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze and squeeze to then push them back up again. And that is based on disproven anatomical concepts, which are 40 years out of date. So what really happens in the way that the body works, and this is like totally proven to the hill, is that actually we're these self-suspending structures where our basic form comes from this really elastic, stretchy, mobile, three-dimensional fascial web. And then everything else is embedded within that. So key things about that are that we work the same whichever way up we are. We can be lying on our back, lying on our front, sitting, standing, and actually we still have pretty much the same movement available to us, and we don't fall apart. You can see how functional a baby is or a toddler is in crawling, and that is because we're not really these top-down structures. Okay, so in a biotensegrity structure, which is what we are, it is impossible that anything can fall. Yeah. But we kind of inherently know that, because we would never say, make sure that you shrug your shoulders 50 times a day to stop your cheeks slipping down into your neck. We would never say that. Right? Because that's ridiculous. Right. Okay. Don't forget to, clench your tummy 50 times a day to stop your lungs from slipping down into your stomach. No, of course not. That's of course not how the body works. Okay, so actually everything has its right place, and everything is self-suspended. Now, within a biotensegrity structure, such as humans, things cannot fall, but the way that things become dysfunctional or out of alignment or in the wrong place or problematic is through too much pulling. Okay, so essentially, if you've got too much tension, stiffness, and pulling happening within the pelvic floor, that pulls on the nearby soft, squishy, and pretty mobile structures, such as your bladder, rectum and uterus. Yeah. So stiffness, tension, and tightness in the pelvic floor pulls the organ down. Okay. And that's the symptoms of prolapse. That's the prolapse. That's the feeling. So how does that tension and stiffness and stuckness get in there? Well, really it can be a wide collection of anything, but it can be direct injury to the pelvic floor, such as episiotomies and tears or falls, or it could be, postural problems, like people that have, sometimes when women will suck their tummies in for years, or will like never want to fart, so we'll hold and hold and hold, so these sorts of postural ways where we clench and grip our bodies builds up tension in the pelvic floor. That is going to aggravate that pulling. Okay. Also, straight up injury of the pelvic floor, like an episiotomy, what you're going to get there is scar tissue, which tightens things up, pulling. And also, of course, because we're these whole interconnected beings, that when we're stressed or anxious, bang, everything is tighter and stiffer too. So, or it could be that you had an injury to your leg, and so that you're limping. Well, that's going to build up tension too. So, all of these different ways.
Yeah.
There are so many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, you hit on so many good things, so many things that I've been saying for years to women to stop doing. And this is why I always say, like, the pelvic floor actually kind of found me, because I was recognizing, right, how the postural stuff was affecting women. And we've been sucking the belly in and tucking the booty for forever.
Yeah.
People are still teaching it.
Chronically tight pelvic floor. Chronically tight pelvic floor.
Right.
These poor ballet dancers, and they're spending their whole time going, suck it up and in. And it's like, pelvic floor is like rocks, and then so you're going to get pelvic floor dysfunction, because like all of the rest of the body, this is the thing about, you've got to think of the pelvic floor like it works like everything else in the body. And everything else in the body, it needs to be nice and, and stretchy and dynamic and elastic and have its full range of motion. Whereas if we get really tight and stuck and stiff in the pelvic floor, we don't have a full range of motion. So we don't have good power. And we also get this pulling going on. So what we need is a nice, elastic and dynamic and mobile pelvic floor.
Yeah. We need to learn how to relax and stretch the pelvic floor.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can we talk about some of the things that maybe you do with your clients, or you recommend for women to work on? Like, what's something that women can do, without seeing a physiotherapist? And then why also, a second part to that, like, when should someone go and seek out a specialist who works with the pelvic floor?
Like you say, we don't have a big enough army. There are just not enough there are just not enough pelvic health physios. There are some countries don't have any, so crazy. Yeah, it's a massive, accessibility is a huge issue. So so things that help to release tension and stuckness and stiffness is, number one is movement therapy that focuses on release, and that can be yoga based, or it can be Pilates based, or anything really that's focusing on opening the body. So that is many, many different types of movement practice. And then anything which focuses on softening. So this is where some of the breath work and that sort of thing come in, is that we're working to soften and to reduce any sort of postural habits, so that can be any kind of movement therapist, and then also, any type of external manual therapy, like massage to the buttocks or massage to the inner thighs, that sort of thing all helps to reduce pelvic floor tension. I really think there is a role for self-massage to scars, once we've had babies, and 90% of women who give birth vaginally end up with some kind of scarring. So I think it'd be really helpful for women at sort of 12, 14, 16 weeks to begin a little bit of gentle scar massage. I think that's really valuable. And also just not then loading our system as well with loads of anxiety and stress. And I've got to say, this is a bit of a bugbear about mine with prolapse, is that when we tell women your bladder is falling out of you, your bladder is falling into your vagina, the obvious response that people make to that is grip, hold, suck everything up, hold it all in. And that makes it worse, because the bladder is not falling into the vagina, it is being pulled. So what we actually need to do is nurture and care for and soften and release the tension and stuckness in our pelvic floors. And then that bladder, she's going to go back to a better place.
So yeah, Anna, I hate to interrupt you, but you said something so important there. And it comes down to a lot of, it's like retraining our brain, right? I feel like I do end up doing so much brain training with my ladies, because it's like, okay, you have this new information, but my body's still fighting it, or my brain, right? Because it's that kind of survival.
This is why I keep using this word biotensegrity, because this is like the whole of biology. It's like, if you look up biology, like down to a cellular level, our bodies are self-suspended in this lovely web. We are holding ourselves up within this lovely web. And the more that we understand that that's how our body as a whole works, the more that we go, well, of course, that's how the pelvic floor works, because it's a body part. So clearly it has the same, it follows the same rules. So it's getting away from this idea. If you believe your pelvic floor is holding everything up from below, I mean, really, that's impossible. How can you ask it's not. The pelvic floor is not holding everything up from below, and it doesn't make any sense really to suggest that it does. So it's when we learn that actually everything is self-suspending, and actually what we need to do is allow the normal stretchy balance and alignment to be okay. It's about finding the stuckness. Where is the stuckness? And then releasing the stuckness.
Yeah, and releasing it in a way that's gentle. You said the word softening earlier, and that's a word I use a lot. We do a lot of ball work, soft ball work.
Yeah.
And
this is how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be soft and dynamic and mobile. We're not supposed to be rigid and tight and stiff. There is nothing about the pelvic floor which is healthy when it is rigid and tight and stiff. We need to be soft and stretchy and mobile and dynamic.
Yeah. And it's because I work with so many women who have a background of really intense fitness, not all of them, but quite a few. Like, they're runners, they do CrossFit, they do high intensity, and there's a time and a place for all of it. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's the counterbalance of that. And, when we can work to be more fluid, I always like the word fluid, right? With fascia. I feel like it should be very fluid. And it's so awesome to me when women can embrace this and start to just learn more about their body and understand fascia, even just a little bit, even if they don't have any background in it, right? But understand, like you said, this biotensegrity that our body is, right? That then you have to change your perspective on movement. We have to get out of these old ways. Like you said, okay, I didn't realize it's been 40 years that we've been having all this new research. Like, how is this even possible, Anna, that we're still...
Because things take time.
That's a long time.
Levin first put the theory forward in the 1980s.
Wow. I didn't realize it was quite so long ago, but that's...
But things just take time. And I think the key thing to learn about it is that everything is connected. We're all joined up in this big stretchy web. If we can imagine ourselves as a big stretchy web, and then everything else is like you've embroidered all of the organs and the bones and the muscles into this stretchy fabric, it's our whole, it's our three-dimensional stretchy fabric. And that our health, we achieve health, structural health, by having this nice, stretchy, dynamic fabric going on. And it's when this fabric gets all tethered and stuck and stiff and tight that you get these pulls through the system. And then, that's back pain, that's hip pain, that's, but these are principles that apply to the whole of the body. We kind of know that if our neck is really stiff, then we might get headaches, or we might get shoulder pain, but it's the same, if our pelvic floor is really stiff, then that's going to tighten up our hip and our lower back, so we can see it in so many different areas of the body. So it's about seeing it in your mind's eye when you're thinking about the pelvic floor.
Now, can you touch on the importance of releasing through the pelvic floor for, I know you mentioned a little bit about the bladder, but specifically like going to the bathroom, right? Being able to pee and being able to release stool like easily. We've talked a little bit about this before on the podcast, but I want to reiterate it again because I think so many women, moms in particular, are in a rush to have to go to the bathroom really quick, right? And just try to force everything out. And so
Okay.
can you just talk about
But
that?
this thing about mums not leaving enough time for pooing. Oh, okay. So this is a really big thing. This is a really big thing. And especially when you're carrying a fresh pelvic floor injury, actually you pooing with your poo, which is such an important physiological process. Pooing is such an important thing. You need to go when you first get the signal, because that feeling that if you put it off, you feel like it's getting sucked up inside you and drying out. That is really happening.
Oh, wow.
So don't. Yeah. So don't. When you get that signal to go poo, go poo. Okay. Rule number 2 is put your feet on little stools. Okay. And you don't have to spend lots of money on like a special squatty potty. These like little 6-inch kitchen stools or IKEA stools. They're perfect. Okay. And also, if you've got little ones at home, they're going to be needing that too. Yeah. So put your feet on stools when you poo, and that helps so that your knees are a little higher than your hips. Okay. And then you need to give yourself plenty of time and not be in a rush, and just allow that poo to come in a nice and relaxed and soft way. Okay. And I know all these mums are saying, but I don't have the time, because all of the kids out there are outside of the bathroom and the baby's going to be crying and my little one's broken his toy and da. Okay. But we see so many constipation problems with young children. Okay. Because they're not taught that it takes time to poo. Okay. We see the problem so much in primary school age children is that they don't want to stop playing. So they sit on the loo for like 5 seconds and then the poo doesn't come. Okay. So we are teaching our children good bowel habits. Okay. If we do the basics, your kids need to have their feet on the stool to poo, because if they feel imbalanced, if your kids are sat on the toilet and their feet don't reach the floor and they feel really imbalanced, they have to grip the pelvic floor. And so they're not going to be able to get the poo out. Okay. And if we teach them to not dedicate time to poo, then we're just cooking up that problem for them. So tell them, Mummy's having a poo. Okay. Leave the bathroom door open. If you've got a small one, bring them with you. You could have a little bouncy chair in the bathroom, have a few toys in the bathroom. It's okay for the kids to come in and see you while you're sat there. That's okay. And you're teaching them that pooing is a healthy, time-consuming process, and to leave enough time for it.
And I love that.
Really
I've never heard this perspective, but it makes so much sense. And I do know like constipation, especially with kids, can be really,
and not having their feet supported so that their pelvic floor is holding them. They're frightened of falling down the loo. Their pelvic floors are like gripping away. You can't get a poo out of that pelvic floor, and also it's such a thing of like, they don't really want to stop their game or their play to go poo. They want to get back to the game. So, teaching them that it takes time, and, that's okay.
So we all need to learn to just chill a little bit more, take a little time, more time for ourselves, even if it's just going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Right. But I know that that's such a thing with, I think all women, but I know moms in particular really tend to rush it and force it. And then, we want to really minimize. And I think this is such important information because, it's funny. I just had a friend of my mom's who really needs to, work on her pelvic floor. She was like, well, I'm going to wait till I have the time to dedicate to really, do the program or whatever. And I'm like thinking, well, we're addressing our pelvic floor all day long. Like you can't do this too soon. You can't start these healthy habits, whether you have any symptoms at all right now, or you think, gosh, I have because I hear this a lot too from women who are like, well, my pelvic floor is fine. Like I don't have any pelvic floor problems. And it's like, okay, well, maybe you don't, But all of these things that we're talking about today, like it is never too early to start practicing them. Like you said, with kids, like I actually have never ever thought about that. And I've had a lot of pelvic floor conversations with amazing
Yeah, yeah,
people. Yeah.
yeah. You know, and I do think teaching young children, you know, that pooing matters and we should give enough time for it
Ah,
is important. And then, you know, we really need to be teaching young girls, particularly, and teenagers, these things like the sucking in of the tummy and the sucking in of the ass. Ass, that's not the right word, is it? Bum. What do you call it in America?
just bum
um,
or butt or whatever.
and like these habits, you know, actually, if we can start gently saying to our teenage girls, this is really not going to be helpful for you, you know, let you be proud of your shape, be proud of your curves, be proud of your softness. And then this all helps us as then mums later to move into that curvy softness that is actually really healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And posture. I just want to add, I know you mentioned posture, but I'll say like with having a teenage daughter myself, one thing and seeing her friends and stuff, the one big thing I've really emphasized with her is her posture. Like you have, because they're on their computers at such a young age now
Yeah,
in school. And I just have to remind him, like, you have to work on your posture. And I see it across the board in kids starting really young. Their posture starts to really diminish. And so this is something that I feel like we're going to actually see a lot more dysfunction a lot younger. And I mean, I feel like we already are seeing it to some degree, but I feel like it's going to get even worse unless we start really doing something about it, because now we have young kids with not good posture at all. And we know that, not good posture leads to pelvic floor issues and back pain and all of those things, right? It's all connected together.
yeah.
So,
And the thing about posture as well is that it's not a fixed thing. It's not like
right.
this is the good posture. It for me, it comes down to having a dynamic posture, having many postures, moving well. So moving between, rather than having this is correct and I must stay in this all the time. It's like being able to move out of and into lots of different positions and keeping things as mobile as we can and keeping moving. I think keeping everything moving all the time from a young age, and avoiding, static, avoiding sitting all day or habitual movement things where we do the same thing with our body over and over and over and over again. I think dynamic movement really promotes this stretchy whole body health that is really
Absolutely.
important.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that. Okay, so now talking about movement, I want to shift gears and talk about something that I love teaching women to do. And it's really hard in the beginning because so many of them are so locked in their pelvis and gripping in their glutes and stuff, but it's really starting to feel the movement around their sits bones. So I want
Yeah.
you to go in and talk about this, because when I didn't obviously always do it. Maybe as a kid you do it, you don't realize it. But at some point in my own body discovery, I started to really feel that. And I was like, oh, opens up a whole new world of
Yeah,
understanding your body and your pelvic floor. And I don't know, it's
yeah,
really
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it is really cool. It is really cool. And, and I think we can do that in a few different movements. I do think there's a lot of value in a deep squat, and it's not the right movement for everybody, but there is something that's really healthy about moving into a deep squat. Again, going back to pooing again, that's actually the position that we're supposed to be in for pooing, which is why the stools are really important, because it brings us into that open position. So that swing and that sway of the sit bones is actually just a really vital movement that we're using all the time for even just to sit. From sitting, we're moving into that open posture, that where the sit bones move a little way apart from each other, and with walking as well, that just takes the sit bones in a little bit of a swing. And these are the things that which we can either use to mobilize the pelvic floor. I actually think walking is just an absolutely fantastic pelvic floor mobilizer. I just think it's so important. Or it can also, if we have any any pain and dysfunction in the pelvis with those movements, that can start to highlight to us where in the pelvic floor we're stiff and too tight. Because the pelvic floor has to go into its kind of outer range. Like if you were to do a Kegel, right, that is the pelvic floor's inner range. That is only the inside range of move, that of the whole of the range of movement of the pelvic floor. That's only a little bit. When you're moving into those more open postures, like the deep squat and the sitting with the sit bones moving apart, that's actually lengthening the pelvic floor. That's taking the pelvic floor through its more outer range, which is really important to allow the pelvic floor to be healthy and also to be powerful. So basically keeping it moving.
Yeah.
Keeping it moving.
But so what I see so much of, and I'm sure you do initially when women walk in, is that for women, most people, and men too, but since I work mostly with women, that when they want to go down into a deep squat, they tuck their butt so severely
because they're under and they go down at the knees.
Yes, they're so restricted in their pelvis. And so it takes time to start to find these from like a brain perspective of like, what is my body supposed to be doing? And
that movement can be so unfamiliar because people can go years without doing that sort of movement. And again, I think there is a little sort of whisper from society in the back of our heads kind of going, you can't just stick your bum out like that, you know, to get around. So I think, you know, it's that we don't move in that way regularly, so we forget how to move in that way regularly. And again, we don't poo in that position, even though it's really healthy. So that, you know, but it's this little whisper from society in the back of our heads saying, you can't just stick your bum out. But
you need to, and your boobs. Women that are bigger chested, I'm always like, you have to stick your chest out, and not so excessively. Like you don't want to take things too far with anything, because you can also stick your butt out too far and then you pull in your low back, right? So it's always like little changes, but it's like, I feel like so much we try to close inward our body, which creates tension inward instead of
feeling like you need to be tight and take up less space. And actually, if we can just breathe into our whole bodies and allow our bodies to take up the space that they are really taking up, then we can relax into our bodies a little bit, and everything then is more soft and more relaxed. And all of this helps to release tension. So, you know, I just think releasing tension is key for all structural health, but particularly, you know, in my practice, I really think that's important when talking about pelvic floor dysfunction and pelvic organ prolapse. But really, those are just principles that apply across the whole body, you know.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of bring up something, and I'd love for you to chime into this, because, you know, having, working with a lot of women who they want to look really fit and look really strong. And I think sometimes they think, oh gosh, well, if I'm not doing intense exercise, I'm not going to be as strong. And that's actually, in my world, like, I'm all for, once you get your body in better alignment, things are working better, your pelvic floor is in the right type of, you know, it's activating the right way where it's not too strong, you know, we're finding that space and all that you actually will be stronger when you learn how to really tap into your fascial system. So you're softer, more pliable, but you're actually stronger. And then when you go back to adding in your weights, like I lift weights too, but I do it in a way that is very like fascially connected. And I'm like, if I can't feel that spreading in my sits bones, well, I know I'm lifting too heavy or whatever it might be, things like that. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, because I think that's something too that my ladies they want to stay strong. And obviously, yes, because as we age, muscle can decline. So I want women to be strong, but there's this balance in it too.
So I think it's really important to remember that strength really means power, okay? And to have power, that requires full range of motion. Okay, so say you had your arm and you just contracted your arm like right up, you know, you've got your hand quite near to your shoulder and you're just contracting it there in that really small bit of range over and over and over again. Okay, that is not really a functionally strong arm. You're not even going to be able to really bring it out straight very easily. Okay, and it's the same everywhere that you need a muscle to be able to lengthen and achieve its full range of motion before you then start contracting it. Because if you contract a muscle that is already tight and stiff and stuck, all you are creating is more tightness, stiffness, and stuckness. You're not really going to gain proper strength, and you are certainly not going to gain that power that comes from a strong and complete range of motion. So it's Amy Stein, pelvic floor physiotherapist in the US, who says, we need to lengthen before we strengthen. And I just think that's so important. We need to lengthen tissue, which we can achieve essentially through this softening process before we strengthen.
Oh my gosh, I think I say that word
when
like
we do
100 times a day. Oh, sorry.
Again, sorry.
Was that?
When we do strengthen, it's got to be functional. I think it's got to be this diverse range of different movements. It's got to be lots of different movements. It's got to use the whole body in a functional way. Really, those kind of like isolated, I'm going to pick this one muscle and contract it over and over and over and over and over and over again, is actually quite a dysfunctional way to get strength. What we need to do is lengthen anywhere that's stiff and stuck, and then strengthen functionally as a whole body. And that's how we become these really powerful, resilient, strong bodies.
I love that.
Not just trying to like force one muscle to play ball, really.
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. It's all interconnected. And so I'm like, if you're doing a bicep curl, you should be focusing on your posture and what are you doing with your pelvic floor? And, it's this whole, like you said, it's more dynamic, because we're never just in life. If you go to move a couch, you're not just doing a bicep curl, right? Like, yeah, your biceps are working, but like, I think sometimes we get stuck in that, like, or women want to focus on one area of their body. And I'm like, we can't, that isn't going to get us optimal results. We have to really look at it all together.
Yeah.
So
all joined up.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. So Anna, can we talk a little bit more about pelvic organ prolapse? And is there anything, I know we kind of started in that conversation, but I feel like that is something that comes up quite a bit in our world, women who have been told like, gosh, surgery is the only need. I know we've talked about releasing and relaxing, but is there anything else that you could add, for women with, okay, so maybe they've been dealing with pelvic organ prolapse for years. Maybe they've told like, it's like a 4th degree, right? There's all the different, however, physical therapists kind of measure them, that, is it best for them to, I'm sure doing manual work would be great for them because they've got to release that. But do you also see women being able to, reverse completely pelvic organ prolapse? I mean, it sounds like you did completely.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like,
I want to talk about this a little bit more, because I feel like so many women, like I know in my world, because I don't measure and I'm not doing internal work, I'm not doing manual work, like I see that we're able to help women with their symptoms dramatically through movement, breath work, releasing, all that kind of stuff. But to fully get rid of it, I want to talk about that, because this is something I feel like women that deal with it, like they don't even know it can happen to them until all of a sudden, like it happens. And then,
Yeah. So, the symptoms are a really good measure of what's happening inside. Okay. I think measuring symptoms is more useful than having a grading, really, because the gradings can just be really scary. And actually, it's totally clear all over the research that really it's very, you can have one woman looked at by 3 different professionals within a week, and they're going to say completely different things, right? Because actually it's, what we've got in there is a really sort of stretchy, shape-shifty, dynamic cave with all these different lumps and bumps that are different depending on how full the bladder is, how full the rectum is, what time of the month it is. Actually measuring how far down the vaginal canal the organ is, I don't believe is as useful as saying, how much does this bother you? How much is this getting in the way of your life? How much in pain are you? How much can you not empty your bladder? How much can you not empty your bowel? How easy is it to poo? I really feel like measuring symptoms is a really good way to stay focused
I love
on
hearing
how
that
you
because
help
I've
them.
always been of the belief, well, if symptoms are getting better, that means it's improving.
Yeah.
But then, there it is this whole measurement thing. Like you said, it can be scary for women. And I think so many
Oh, it's
times
really scary.
it gets in, then their
And,
brain is like in the
and
way of
honestly, it's
healing.
based on this old model. It's based on how far down has it fallen. And that, again, that's like, I don't believe that that has the value that is that it seems to, or that has the reputation of. I actually think it's more important when I'm assessing a woman physically as a physical therapist and looking internally. I actually think it's far more important to ask, okay, is the bladder to the left or the right? And is the tissue that's pulling it to the left or the right a little bit tight or really tight? And actually, so the way that you can see that externally is like, okay, so that hip doesn't move at all, and she looks really stiff through that area of her lower back. So I actually think it's more important to be saying this prolapse, where is it being pulled by? Okay, so say like a cervix prolapse really often is being pulled down into the left or the right by tension in those side areas of the vagina, which are really, really linked to the adductors. So it might be that somebody's got really tight adductors. Okay, so if she's got really tight adductors, that's causing a pull on the cervix in that direction. So if you can soften and release and let go through the adductors, that cervix is going to be in a happier position more of the time. Okay, and for bladders and for bladder, and I know the bladder is at the front of the body, but a lot of the root cause of the tension of that actually comes from the back. So like just either side of the sacrum, and the rectoceles, like very, very commonly, the tension is coming from the actual perineum. And so this, I've gone off piece a bit.
Well, I have a question. I have a question for you, Anna. So, because this is really good. So do you see that a lot of your women coming in with prolapse, do they tend to be like grippy in the glutes, the pelvis tucked and really restricted? Because like we know, obviously the pelvic floor has function on its own, but like you're talking about, and I'm always preaching this, is like, we have to address what's going on in the adductors, through the hips and the glutes and all of that. So are you seeing though that, because to me, what I'm feeling like is when we start to really release that grippy glute and get that pelvis to soften, that on its own can have a positive role. So do you see that a lot of your ladies that have the pelvic organ prolapse to any degree, that they tend to come into you with that tucked and tight?
Absolutely. Okay. That tucked tight is you seeing the tight pelvic floor, that tuckedness of the pelvis, that tension through the lower glutes, that tension through the adductors. That is the tension of the pelvic floor showing itself on the outside of the body. Yeah. But equally, we can affect it by treating the outside of the body, by releasing those postures and softening those muscles. Because it's all joined up and three-dimensional, right. we can see the dysfunction in the pelvic floor by looking at what's happening with the adductors and the pelvis and the sacrum. And equally, by working to treat those areas, we are treating the pelvic floor. And when I say treat, I mean release.
Yeah, no, I love this. And this is great because this is not taught this is not taught in any sort of anatomy. Oh my gosh. I mean, Anna, I didn't even learn about the pelvic floor.
It's like a totally isolated thing, and it doesn't work along the same mechanical principles as the whole of the rest of the body. And, and it's like a penis shaped canal in there. It's not. We're really not taught the truth. And actually, that's actually a really big thing.
Yeah, no, I love this conversation because it goes to show again, I always think it's good for women if they can find a good, and good is the key word, pelvic floor physical therapist, to just have feedback. I think sometimes that feedback can be helpful, but ultimately, if we're just addressing internal pelvic floor and we're not addressing what's going on with their pelvis and the grippy glutes and their, tight inner line of their legs, we're missing a big piece. And so this is kind of what I see. And again, this is because I know not all physical therapists are created equal, just like it's in every profession, right? So, because I'll get women who have been to pelvic floor physical therapists, and it may be beneficial like for them a little bit, but it's not like solving their problem because they're not addressing what we just talked about. Isn't that interesting?
We need to remember that we're all joined up, and everything is connected, and treat the body as such, and everyone's on their own journey, and I do really think we have a massive issue with accessibility to pelvic physio. We just don't have enough of us at all.
No.
And so saying to ourselves, how can we soften the pelvic floor? Through movement, looking at posture, through breath, through external massage, just like massage to the thighs and the glutes. This is great, and again, just experimenting with some self-massage to any pelvic floor scars. So it's the pelvic floor scars, it's the episiotomy and tears, which can be difficult to reach externally.
Yeah.
So
that's where it can be really good if you can go to someone who can really break up or help to soften the scar tissue. Okay.
But we know now, actually self-massage to C-section scars is really becoming something well known and well talked about, and people will do that,
Mm-hmm.
And actually it's, it's the same for it's the same techniques. It's like, actually, let's just gently touch, and then when you start to gently touch your own episiotomy and tear scars, and I wouldn't be doing that before 12 weeks, and if there were any sort of infection or problem with wound healing, I would leave it another 3 or 4 weeks. And another caveat I'm going to say here is I would not be doing that if you've had any pelvic floor surgery. If you've had any pelvic floor surgery, I just wouldn't be going there at all without having an internal assessment. Okay. But if you've not had hysterectomy anterior or posterior repair, so those women aside, I think you really need to go see a physiotherapist. Okay. But if that's not you, and you're a mum with a young baby and you've got an episiotomy scar, you might find that that tension from that scar really, really affects the whole way that your hip and lower back and pelvis function and move, and that you can see that on the outside. But what's also happening is it's probably pulling the rectum, bladder, and cervix on the inside, and so you're having those set of symptoms as well. So softening with movement, softening with just using our bodies in a good way, softening with addressing trauma and anxiety and stress. And then if you also need a little bit of self-massage, if you have got a physical therapist near you, I would just strongly advise that you go and get their opinion and get looked at. But I'm aware that that's not everyone.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Please don't do it. If you've had that big prolapse surgery, don't just do it on your own. Get some help with that.
It can never hurt to have some feedback from an expert who is all about the pelvic floor. I was going to ask you, what about with natural tearing? Do we tend to see much scar tissue with natural tearing, or does it heals better than episiotomies? But
for sure, yeah. So third degree tear tends to give you tension on both sides because of the way that they have to do the repairs. You end up often with tension on both sides, and that kind of pulls around the pelvic floor and very often causes a pull on the bladder. So that often doesn't make sense to people. Like, well, the tear was at the back, why is the prolapse at the front? And it's because to do the repair, they have to tighten up the back of the pelvic floor on both sides, and that's like causing this pull through the pelvis onto the bladder. So if you've had, tears are so much more random. So an episiotomy in most countries is pretty much always on the right-hand side, which is why you might tend to see more right-sided hip problems, right-sided back problems, right-sided stiffness. And I think women do think often that it's because they're holding their baby on the hip, but actually I think more often than not, it's the episiotomies. Whereas the tears obviously can be much more random. And a third degree, or obviously, I mean, if you've got a fourth degree, you need to see a physio. Even if that involves traveling, you need to see a physio. And
that's
a third
good.
degree,
This is great. Great to know. No, this is great information. So in the US here, episiotomies are done less and less and less. So I don't know, you guys still, does the UK still do
loads
quite a bit?
Really?
Loads of them. Yeah, we have finally moved away because with my pregnant moms, when I talk to them, like I'm not hearing them having episiotomies. And I always bring, I mean, sometimes they're needed, right? There's always outliers for birth and things like that. But we work so much during pregnancy on how to prepare her so she can have minimal tearing. And it's amazing. And guess what? The biggest stuff is it's the releasing, learning how to like find that space and that link through the pelvis. And it's amazing. It's a game changer. It surprised me over the years.
And then when there is pelvic floor injury, it'd be that episiotomy or be that tearing, I think it's really important to remember, okay, I've been injured. Right, I've got an injury. Now, if that was a hamstring tear or a biceps tear, what would I do about it? I would rest it, and then I would give it some gentle massage, and then I would just gently start to engage it again. I wouldn't ignore it, and I wouldn't force it. I wouldn't be like, right, okay, I've had this. I think we need to, when we do have a pelvic floor injury, we need to then look after ourselves and nurture ourselves and use all of those lovely things like rest and good food in order to promote healing as much as we can. And I know that sometimes, if you've got a new baby, you had a birth injury, and then your baby's on like special care or something like that, that's not going to be your story, and you've just got to do your best. But if you can, rest and nurture and soften, and then where you find stiff, stuck scar tissue, just gently take it between your finger and thumb and just gently work it. Like I say, from about 14, 16 weeks onwards, not if you've had prolapse surgery. And if you've got those higher grade tears, like a 3 or a 4, please do seek out physio.
Okay. Anna, that's so great to know. So what about, here's a question with the prolapsing or any sort of pelvic floor dysfunction, whether it's just incontinence or prolapsing. Is it ever too late? Right? Because we get moms, like I mentioned to you before, like what about women in their 60s, even 70s that are like, I've had this for 30 years or 40 years?
Fine. Scar tissue will still soften. Tension will still soften. It's harder. The longer you leave it, it's generally going to be harder, but that's fine. Yeah. No, there's no time limit. The body will always respond. It just is going to be a bit, like the inertia of like getting it rolling, getting the ball rolling in the right direction. But it's everything. It's all still totally never too late. No.
Great. I love it. I say that all the time. So I wanted to hear you say it to confirm. More confirmation for our ladies to hear like, hey, it doesn't matter. Yes, it can take a little longer because all those habits are set and that tissue's been tight for a long time, but
sometimes the injury is at the childbirth, and that's where things start to become a bit dysfunctional. But essentially they're at a low level. Women kind of get on with it. They're busy. They've got busy lives. They've got young children. They're like, I'm okay. I'm fine. And then as the menopause comes upon us, and then what happens there is that the general overall elasticity of our structure just dials down a little bit. Now, if we've already got a tightness, stiffness, stuckness that's causing a little bit of a problem, that when we dial down our general elasticity, we're dialing down our general resilience. And so those injuries might just start to become more to the forefront, more symptomatic. They might tip over a critical point and become a prolapse, something like that. So again, actually, it's all the same techniques. It's softening, it's releasing, it's nurturing, it's moving well. Don't be shy about a little bit of self-massage. You might need lube if that's you in that middle stage of life. All of these things. Again, not if you've had prolapse surgery. Go see a physio. Okay,
got it. Anna, this has been so great. So I want to wrap up with, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you have like a tip of advice or anything for our ladies listening?
I don't know. I've written myself some notes, but I feel like we've covered.
We've had lots of good stuff we've brought up today.
Loads of stuff. Well, I just want to say thanks to everyone for listening. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Anna. It was so great to get to meet you and so great to have this awesome chat, more pelvic floor conversation. Will you tell everybody where they can find out more about you? I mean, we do have some ladies in the UK if they happen to be near you. And so, I know you have some education.
My diary is totally booked and I can't really, I I can't see more patients.
Oh, well, that's kind of a good place to be.
Yeah, if you look up my website, which is just my name, then on there I've got various links to various self-care things and podcasts and webinars, and I've got like a video thing, like a video seminar, which kind of, it was written for professionals, but like anyone can watch it, and you can find my research papers there. And sometimes if what you're looking for is a release focused approach, then, you know, a really good way about things is to go find your local practitioner and say, I want a released focused approach. And then you can take like my research papers, or, you know, you can take the links and things like that and say, I want help. I think it's coming from tension because of this, this, and this. Can you help me with that? You know, and like I say, that very well might be a physical therapist, but it might also be movement teachers and massage therapists and anyone else. And if you go along and say, look, I believe that my pelvic floor dysfunction is coming from the too much tension in this part of my body, can you help me with that? That's a really strong way to go.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And it really comes back to us all taking control of our own health. And, you know, we go to experts, which is great, but also you learning so much about your body is really key to a lot of this.
And there will always be, you know, professional, you know, sometimes you have to try different, you have to meet a few different professionals. And sometimes it's that you might actually need a combination of this person, and this person. It might be that, you know, you've been walking with a limp because of that poorly foot. Okay, so you need to get that poorly foot sorted. Okay, who's going to help you with that? Okay, and then who's going to help you? You know, it might be that you look at all the different ways that you could be tight and stiff through the pelvis, and then work piece by piece. It might be that you need to speak to somebody about your anxiety. It might be that you need some treatment on your lower back. You know, it might be that you need to move well and be encouraged to move well. So all of these things.
Well, that was such great advice. So thank you so much, Anna. This is so great to chat with you and for you to share so many good nuggets with everyone listening. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Really nice to meet you.